All right, so you know that joke we all heard about tortoise speed, like slow and steady wins the race. Well, what if I told you that their slow and steady approach to life is like a superpower?
Hmm.
When we're talking about creatures that can live for like 50, even 100 years in some cases.
Wow, yeah.
It's kind of wild to think about the commitment that goes into caring for a tortoise.
It really is a whole different level of pet ownership.
Yeah, over such a long lifespan.
It's not just about like providing for their needs right now. It's about understanding that you're essentially becoming a steward
Oh, yeah.
for a creature that might outlive you.
Oh, gosh. I was just thinking that it's almost like becoming the caretaker of a living piece of history.
Yeah.
So for this deep dive, we're going to be looking at a pretty extensive tortoise care guide.
Okay, cool.
And this is something you want to make sure you're getting this right.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to unpack all the essentials from setting up the perfect habitat to understanding their unique dietary needs.
And maybe even debunking a few common myths along the way.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, did you know that despite their reputation for simplicity, tortoises actually need a lot more than just a tank and some lettuce to thrive?
Yeah, that's where this guide gets really fascinating.
Right.
It really emphasizes that creating the ideal habitat is like building a miniature ecosystem for them.
Yeah.
It's all about replicating their natural environment as closely as possible.
That's such a key point because in the wild, tortoises have vast territories to roam, right?
Yeah.
They're used to exploring, foraging, and like experiencing a range of temperatures throughout the day.
So they need a lot of space.
Yeah.
I was shocked. The guide recommends a minimum enclosure size of 6 feet by 6 feet for Mediterranean tortoises.
Wow.
I was blown away by that. I had no idea they needed that much space.
Yeah, it's easy to underestimate their space requirements, when you see them moving so slowly.
Right.
But that spaciousness is vital for a few different reasons.
Okay.
First, tortoises need room to thermoregulate,
Okay.
meaning they move between warmer and cooler areas to kind of
Yeah.
adjust their body temperature.
So it's like they have their own little built-in climate control system.
Exactly.
That's cool.
And a larger enclosure allows for a more natural temperature gradient,
Okay.
with a basking zone where they can soak up the heat,
Right.
and then a cooler zone where they can retreat to avoid overheating.
Makes sense. So it's not just about having enough room to move around, it's about having the space to regulate their own body temperature.
Exactly.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together.
And speaking of fitting together the substrate,
Mm.
the material lining the bottom of the enclosure is another crucial element.
Right.
The guide really pushes for natural mixes like soil and sand or coconut coir.
Okay. And it specifically warns against using wood shavings.
Yep.
Now, why is that? I always thought wood shavings were like the go-to for reptiles.
Well, this is where it gets a little unsettling.
Okay.
Wood shavings can actually be quite harmful to tortoises.
Okay.
First, if they're dusty, they can cause respiratory problems if inhaled.
Okay, that makes sense. But what's the issue with ingesting them? I mean, wouldn't they just pass through?
Unfortunately, not always. Wood shavings can get stuck in the tortoise's digestive system,
Ooh.
leading to impaction.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's not just a matter of comfort, it's like a potential health hazard?
Yeah.
Definitely something I wouldn't have thought about.
It really highlights the importance of doing your research
Yeah.
and understanding the nuances of tortoise care.
Yeah.
Now, while we're on the topic of potential hazards, let's talk about temperature.
Oh, this is another area where I was surprised by how specific the requirements are.
Yeah.
It's not just about keeping them warm, it's about creating that temperature gradient you mentioned earlier, right?
Absolutely. We touched on this briefly when we were discussing thermoregulation,
Mm-hmm.
but let's delve a little deeper.
Okay.
As cold-blooded creatures, tortoises rely on external sources of heat to regulate their body temperature.
Right.
So we need to provide both a basking zone, ideally between 90 and 100 degrees Fahrenheit,
Whoa, that's hot.
and a cooler zone around 72 to 77 degrees.
Okay.
So a good range.
Yeah. The guide also mentions UVB lighting as being non-negotiable.
Yes.
They recommend 10 to 12 hours a day. I have to admit, I always thought UVB was more of a nice-to-have thing for reptiles, not a necessity.
It's easy to think that, but UVB is absolutely crucial for tortoises.
Okay.
It plays a vital role in their ability to synthesize vitamin D3.
Right, vitamin D. But how does that connect to their overall health?
Well, vitamin D3 is essential for calcium absorption,
Right.
which is what keeps their bones and shells strong and healthy.
Oh.
Without sufficient UVB exposure, They can develop a condition called metabolic bone disease,
Mm.
which leads to weakened bones and shell deformities.
And knowing that they can live for decades, those long-term health implications become even more significant, right?
Exactly.
Right.
It's a reminder that while tortoises might seem low maintenance on the surface,
Yeah.
their care requirements are actually quite nuanced
Right.
and important for their long-term well-being.
Speaking of long-term, the guide also touches on vacations.
Okay, let's face it, if we're talking about a pet that could live for 50 plus years, chances are we're going to need a vacation at some point.
That's a great point, and the guide acknowledges this, offering some practical advice.
Okay.
For shorter trips, automatic timers for the heat and UVB lights are a great way to ensure consistency.
But what about longer vacations?
For anything longer than a few days, the guide stresses the importance of finding someone trustworthy to check on the tortoise daily.
So even though they can survive for a while without food, fresh water, heat, and lighting are non-negotiable.
Absolutely. It really reinforces the idea that tortoise ownership is a long-term commitment.
Yeah, you can't just set it and forget it.
Right.
Okay, so we've covered the habitat, and it's way more complex than I initially thought.
Mm-hmm.
But what about their diet? Is it really as simple as just giving them a head of lettuce every day?
That's a common misconception, and one that the guide tackles head-on.
Really?
While leafy greens are a major part of their diet, it's all about variety. I was hoping you'd say that. So lettuce is on the menu, but what else should we be offering?
Think of it like creating a salad bar for your tortoise.
Oh, I love that.
Kale, dandelion greens, mustard greens, collard greens. All of these are excellent choices.
Okay, so variety is key.
Yes,
What about other vegetables like carrots and bell peppers? Are those safe for tortoises?
they can definitely be part of a balanced diet,
Okay.
but the guide recommends offering them in moderation
Okay.
because they have a higher sugar content compared to leafy greens.
No.
Think of them as supporting roles,
Oh.
not the main act.
Gotcha. And I have to ask about this because I know it's a popular choice. Cucumbers good or bad?
This is where we get to bust a myth.
Okay.
The guide debunks the idea that cucumbers are a staple food for tortoises.
Whoa.
In fact, they should be considered a treat offered sparingly.
I bet a lot of people are surprised to hear that.
Yeah.
So lots of leafy greens, veggies in moderation. What else is essential for a healthy tortoise diet?
Calcium is incredibly important, especially for maintaining strong, healthy shells.
Right.
The guide recommends sprinkling calcium powder on their food a couple of times a week.
And that ties back to the UVB lighting we were talking about earlier.
Yes.
Which helps them absorb that calcium. It's like a whole chain reaction.
Exactly.
Now, is there an ideal time of day to feed a tortoise?
Oh, that's a good question.
Does it even matter? I figured they just graze whenever they feel like it.
Actually, the guide suggests feeding them in the morning,
Oh,
ideally after they've had a chance to bask and warm up.
why is that?
Well, think about it. After basking, their metabolism is revved up and they're more active.
Right.
They're primed for digestion and ready to make the most of their food.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've covered habitat and diet, both surprisingly nuanced. What about hydration? Do tortoises even need to drink water if they're getting moisture from their food?
You'd think so, but providing fresh water daily is still crucial even if they don't seem to drink much.
And the guide also mentions baths. Is that just about keeping them clean?
Baths are actually a multitasker when it comes to tortoise care. Weekly soaks in shallow, lukewarm water help with hydration,
Oh, wow.
encourage waste expulsion, and prevent their skin from drying out.
So it's like a spa day for your shelled friend.
Exactly.
A spa day, A&D essential care, all rolled into one.
I love it. But this is making me realize tortoises need more than just the basics, right?
Mhm.
They need enrichment too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not just about physical health.
Yeah.
It's about mental stimulation and creating an environment where they can express their natural behaviors.
Right.
And that brings us to the next part of our deep dive, where we'll explore the fascinating world of tortoise enrichment.
Perfect.
Mm.
We've covered a lot of ground already, and it's amazing how much there is to learn about these seemingly simple creatures. We'll be right back to delve into the world of tortoise enrichment, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about how these tortoises can live for a really long time.
Right.
Still wrapping my head around that. And it makes me think about how important enrichment must be for them,
Yeah.
especially over such a long lifespan. It's a great point. The guide emphasizes that just like any other pet,
Yeah.
tortoises need mental and physical stimulation
Mm-hmm.
to thrive.
So what does enrichment even look like for a tortoise?
One of the key things the guide recommends
Mhm.
is supervised exploration,
Okay.
allowing your tortoise to roam around your home or garden for short periods. can provide valuable enrichment,
Okay.
but it does come with some important caveats.
I was just thinking about that. Letting a tortoise loose in my house sounds like a recipe for disaster.
You're not wrong to be cautious. The guide stresses the importance of tortoise-proofing any area where they're exploring.
Okay.
Indoors, that means being mindful of hazards, like furniture they could bump into,
Right.
or slippery floors they could struggle to navigate.
And outdoors, I imagine the risks are even greater.
Absolutely. The guide is very clear about the need to secure any outdoor area to prevent escapes.
Right.
You also have to consider potential predators
Yeah.
and natural hazards like ponds or like thick undergrowth.
It's amazing how we take for granted our ability to navigate our surroundings.
Yeah.
But for a tortoise, even a seemingly harmless backyard can be full of hidden dangers.
It's a great reminder to approach their care from their perspective.
I like that.
Now, beyond supervised exploration, the guide highlights the importance of creating foraging opportunities
Okay.
within their enclosure.
So how do we do that?
Adding things like hay or leaf litter to their substrate allows them to engage in natural digging and foraging behaviors.
So it's not just about the physical activity, it's about stimulating their minds as well.
Yes.
It's giving them a chance to problem solve and interact with their environment in a way that feels natural to them.
Exactly. And speaking of natural behavior, the guide mentions a really interesting example of enrichment.
Okay.
Apparently, there's a company called Guinea Gourmet Treats
Okay.
that creates these elaborate foraging puzzles specifically for tortoises.
That's awesome.
They hide tasty treats within a complex arrangement of natural materials, encouraging the tortoises to use their senses and problem-solving skills to find the rewards.
That's so cool. I love the idea of companies creating products that cater to the specific enrichment needs of tortoises. It shows how much our understanding of their care has evolved.
It really does. And it highlights the fact that even though they might seem like simple creatures,
You're right.
they have complex needs.
Yeah.
And they thrive when we provide them with opportunities to engage with their world in meaningful ways.
Mm-hmm.
Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about health monitoring.
Okay, good point.
Huh.
Because with a lifespan that can stretch over decades, being able to spot subtle signs of illness early on is critical.
Absolutely. And the guide does a great job of outlining what to look for in a healthy tortoise.
Okay.
It might seem basic, but it's worth repeating. A healthy tortoise is active, has a good appetite, and has a smooth, hard shell.
Yeah.
These are the baseline observations that can help you catch any potential problems early on.
So what are the red flags that should send us rushing to the vet?
Lethargy, loss of appetite, any softening of the shell or discharge from the eyes or nose, these are all signs that something is wrong
Okay.
and require immediate veterinary attention.
Got it. Any deviation from those basic signs of health should be taken seriously.
Yes.
The guide also mentions stress behaviors.
Right.
What do those look like in a tortoise?
Things like pacing back and forth in the enclosure or repeatedly bumping into the walls can be signs of stress.
Oh, okay.
This often ties back to having an enclosure that's too small or lacking in enrichment.
Right.
They're literally feeling trapped and frustrated.
That's heartbreaking. It's a reminder that their environment plays such a huge role in their overall well-being.
Absolutely.
Now, I have to ask about head bobbing and hissing. Are those things we should be worried about?
Not necessarily.
Okay, good.
The guide explains that head bobbing is often a natural behavior
Uh-huh.
related to dominance or mating displays.
Oh, interesting. So it's more of a communication signal than a
Yeah.
sign of distress.
Exactly. And hissing usually happens when they're startled or feeling defensive.
Okay.
It's their way of saying, back off.
Oh,
It's a natural response, not necessarily a cause for concern.
good to know. It's helpful to have that context so we don't overreact to every little behavior.
Absolutely. Now, remember earlier when we touched on vacations and the need for someone to check on your tortoise?
Yeah.
Well, the guide actually goes a bit deeper into that,
Okay.
offering some specific advice for longer trips.
Okay. Because as we've already established, a tortoise vacation plan is a must.
Right.
So what else should we be thinking about?
The guide reiterates that while tortoises can handle short periods without food,
Mm-hmm.
their need for fresh water, proper heating, and UVB lighting is non-negotiable.
Right. Those are the essentials that can't be compromised even for a few days.
Exactly. So for longer trips, it's not just about having someone pop in to top off the water dish.
Yeah.
It's about ensuring those core environmental conditions are consistently met.
It reinforces that finding someone knowledgeable and trustworthy is key. Now I'm curious about the whole aspect of handling and interacting with a tortoise.
Okay.
They're not exactly cuddle buddies like a puppy. So
Mhm.
what's the best way to approach interaction?
That's a great question. And the guide emphasizes that interaction should always be on the tortoise's terms.
Okay.
While they do enjoy gentle handling, it's important to avoid any positions that might cause stress or discomfort, like holding them upside down.
So it's about respecting their nature and understanding that they might not be as demonstrative as other pets?
Exactly. It's about appreciating their unique personalities
Right.
and allowing them to engage with us in their own way.
And this ties into the final and perhaps most thought-provoking point the guide makes, which
Mhm.
is the reality of their lifespan. As we've discussed, 50 plus years is a really long time.
It's not just about providing for their immediate needs. It's about recognizing that you're potentially making a lifelong commitment or even a multi-generational one.
Wow, that really puts things in perspective. It's
Yeah.
not a decision to be taken lightly.
Absolutely. Caring for a tortoise requires patience, dedication, and a willingness to adapt to their changing needs over time.
Yeah.
It's a journey, not a sprint.
And on that note, I think we've covered all the key takeaways from this comprehensive tortoise care guide.
Yeah, we've delved into habitat diet, enrichment, health monitoring, and even the importance of planning for vacations.
But before we wrap up our deep dive,
Okay.
I want to circle back to that thought-provoking point about lifespan
Yeah.
and the unique commitment involved in caring for a tortoise.
Right.
Because the guide ends with a question that really stuck with me. It asked if tortoises could choose their owners, what would they be looking for?
Oh, that's a good one.
It's such a cool way to kind of reframe our thinking
Mhm.
about pet ownership.
Mhm.
It shifts the focus from what we want in a pet to what a tortoise would actually need
Right.
to thrive.
It's true.
It makes you realize they're not looking for someone who's just going to like shower them with attention
Yeah.
or buy them the fanciest toys.
Right.
They're looking for someone who really understands
Yeah.
their often subtle needs.
It's about recognizing that their slow pace and quiet nature
Right.
aren't weaknesses, but they're actually integral parts of who they are.
I was thinking if a tortoise could choose, they'd probably be looking for someone who's done their research.
Yeah.
Someone who understands the commitment involved in providing a spacious and stimulating habitat,
Right.
a proper diet,
Yep.
and regular health checks.
All those things.
I was honestly surprised by how much I learned about the importance of things like substrate and UVB lighting.
Yeah.
I knew those things were important for reptiles in general,
Uh-huh.
but I didn't realize just how much they could impact a tortoise's
Right.
long-term health and well-being.
It's a good reminder that even those seemingly simple care requirements are actually crucial
Yeah.
for their survival.
And it makes you realize how important it is to
Mhm.
choose your sources of information carefully.
Right.
This guide, for example, goes into a level of detail
Yeah.
that you just might not find in a more general care sheet.
It's true. And that's the beauty of a deep dive.
Right.
It's about going beyond those surface level facts
Mm.
and gaining a much deeper understanding of the complexities
Mm-hmm.
of a subject.
Well, after this deep dive, I can confidently say I have a newfound appreciation for tortoises.
Yeah, me too.
They might not be the most, flamboyant pets,
Right.
but their longevity, their resilience, their
Yeah.
connection to the ancient world,
Mm.
it's truly remarkable.
They offer such a unique perspective on life,
Yeah.
reminding us to kind of slow down,
Yeah.
appreciate the simple things,
Right.
and take the long view.
So to all our listeners out there, whether you're a seasoned tortoise owner or just starting to explore the world of these fascinating creatures, just remember, knowledge is power.
Yeah,
The more you learn, the better equipped you'll be to provide the care that they need to thrive.
I agree with that.
And maybe the next time you encounter a tortoise, you won't just see them as this slow-moving reptile, but you'll see them as this complex, intelligent being worthy of our respect and admiration.
Absolutely.
And hey, maybe even ask yourself, would a tortoise choose M?
That's a good question.
That's a question that might just lead you down a path of some fascinating discovery.
Yeah.
That's all for today's deep dive on tortoise care. Thanks for joining us on this journey, and until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those aha moments coming.